everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Krista. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, I'm feeling a little bit tired today, multiple reasons. One, it was my birthday yesterday, and you commented on my Instagram story where I was in Shoreditch last night in London, and I went to an all-you-can-eat lasagna bar. 20 quid in central London for all you eat. And I gotta admit, Nick, the lasagna was good. The garlic bread was incredible. They did these massive deep fried mozzarella sticks and 5-pound Negronis until you ordered food. So got in on those a little bit. And basically, I live at the top of a hill. There's not a lot of hills in London, but I live on top of one of them. And we took the one bus stop from the tube exit to ours just so we didn't have to walk up the hill because we were a little full, Nick.
It's been a successful evening at the all-you-can-eat if you can't go up the hill afterwards. That is absolutely a bargain, and 5-pound Negronis is pretty much unheard of in this day and age. Last time I was in London, I was pretty caught off guard about the cost of a beer, and a pint was like around £8. I think I saw last time. When I moved, it was £3. I remember we were blowing up when we had to pay £4.20 for the first time, and now it's near double. What a cool place! Is it just an all-you-can-eat lasagna? Is there nothing else on the menu?
No, so they do a full kind of Italian menu. There's some pizzas on there. There's some other home pastas, but it's sort of like, you know me, American. Like if it's 20 pounds all you can eat lasagna, I'm going to see how much lasagna I can eat. My friends set the over/under at 3 plates. I got to 2.5. So I didn't hit the 3. So whoever set the odds, kind of they knew the competitors involved. So I could have had more, Nick, but like I'm just at a point now. My pride isn't as strong as it used to be. I didn't feel the urge to have to disprove them, and I'm glad I didn't.
That is very noble of you. I'd say my metabolism wouldn't allow me to get to the 3 mark, even if I tried these days. No matter how much exercise and stuff I do now, it catches up with me pretty quickly. So, I'm glad you had a good, enjoyable evening and got to enjoy it in style. Negronis and lasagna, that is a new combination for me.
Well, if anybody that is based in London listening to the podcast wants to know where it is and details, I can let you know. The one thing I would say, Nick, is that the name of the restaurant's Italian. And I think the translation is without end, which is obviously a great name if you're going to serve bottomless lasagna. So if anyone's in London looking for an idea, nice little date night, let me know. I'll send you the details to it. But the other reason I'm feeling tired, Nick, and it might still be just the amount of lasagna in my body, but last night I woke up at 1 a.m. local time here in London to watch the NFL draft. Probably got to bed at about 3:30 or 4 by the time the Bengals picked, and I was able to mentally decompress my thoughts on it. But, Nick, have you ever stayed up to watch the NFL draft before?
I have watched, I think, the first couple of picks before when I was young and full of energy and had the stamina to be able to pull it off. It's just such a big spectacle. I think it's a really cool, all the build-up. It's about the build-up as much as the pick itself. And it always seems to be such a huge amount of interest and intrigue, and all the mock drafts that are going on. It makes you want to be there and see who is picked, particularly if you are a fan of a specific team, right? That's really where the fandom, I think, almost comes up as much as anything, particularly in the off season. So I've seen a couple of picks in my time, but not for a while now. I'm getting too weary it's even difficult for me to hold out for the Super Bowl. So the draft itself is just a notch below that.
Well, it is nice now with the draft. I'd say must be about like 5-6 years now. They've started moving it. Used to always be hosted in New York City, but now it's a traveling circus. This year went to Green Bay. Those that don't know Green Bay, home of Lambeau Field. I'd say it's on par with, say, an Anfield in Liverpool or Bernabeu in Madrid. Like it has that sort of history behind it. So it's cool that they're moving it around. Stadium to stadium across the U.S. as they do the draft. And Nick, it brings up a question for me to you is, I find the NFL to be really unique in that its ability to create events, I just don't see being duplicated anywhere else in the sports world. And I guess the question is, are NFL fans just so unique in their fandom and their craziness that the NFL is able to create these events that, for all intents and purposes, I don't know if you remember when we spoke to Blake Stutchin, who used to be at the NFL draft is, for all intents and purposes, an administrative procedure where NFL teams are sending a fax into the NFL making a personnel selection. And now it's a 3-day traveling circus. As you mentioned before, then there's the NFL Combine, which is a whole week-long event that's covered by the NFL channel, ESPN. People are traveling to Indianapolis for that. And it just, are NFL fans actually that crazy? Or is the NFL actually that good at being an entertainment business? And I think for me, NFL fans are great, but that's not to say that football fans in the UK aren't crazy. And I feel like the NFL is just, they're great at what they do in the off season and building content. I've said for me, there's not a month in the calendar where the NFL doesn't have a tentpole moment. You know, you think the season starts in September, it runs through February with the Super Bowl, the Combine's in March, then you've got free agency in the draft in April, then you've got rookie mini camp, in May, June, then training camp starts in July, and then the preseason's in August. There's literally something every single month that people can talk about, and I don't think the NFL fans help, but I don't think you can just credit the fandom when you think of all the things the NFL does to build up those moments.
Yeah, it's tough to define and work out how it all comes together, right? I think it is these things can't be done overnight. They can't be orchestrated just on a whim. They take time to build, right? The draft hasn't always had this level of fandom, but they found a way to bring it all together to create this excitement and create an incredible experience. I think them bringing fans into the draft itself, so you hear the cheers, you hear the boos, you hear everything going on, and making it such a moment that we've seen for time and time again, for generationally, how impactful that is to people watching at home and following from home, to hear the energy coming from audiences in the live experience itself. And even for the draft, I think that has played a huge role. I can still remember seeing a number of drafts back in the day, the highlights, the clips that exist around, I'm trying to remember who it actually was. It's around quarterbacks, whether a team's picking a quarterback or not picking a quarterback. I'm going to say it could be Ryan Leaf or a Peyton Manning situation. I can't remember. There was a couple that stood out where there was shock happening in the arena, and you hear those boos and just this. You can feel the fans just their passion, but also that build up to that very moment. It's such a long and drawn out process. It's not, I think what the NFL does really, really well is, you said they're always on in a sense, but I think it's actually kind of the opposite, which allows them to do that. What I mean by that is, with the NBA and the MLB being 82 games or MLB 160 games or whatever it is, the season's just, you have to be always on. Like every other day there's something happening, and you don't allow the story to sort of manifest and sort of to create itself. It's sort of too much built on actually the live game experience, which is the NFL has been able to build up all these stories around the live events themselves. They only have 16, 17 games, 17 games in a regular season. And the rest of the year, there's all this extra breathing room to create these moments. So the fandom can relax a bit and then start peaking higher rather than trying to stay at a constant like you see with most of the other leagues. So I think that they've been well placed. Their limited number of games they have allows them to create these moments that really do have meaning and substance. I think it's quite interesting with the NFL, especially the fact that the draft has become such a big moment, yet it's about the teams of 52 player squads and plus all the practice squads. You're talking even bigger than that. So one player you would not think moves the needle, but they've been able to. And I'm not sure if it's the NFL will take all the credit for it, whether it's a fandom, whether it's just a mix of these things, that one player can change it all, can change the direction of a dynasty. And obviously you can point to quarterbacks, but there's even obviously some change makers outside of that have had huge impact that can change the direction of a franchise. And yet also they can do absolutely nothing for the franchise. And it can just be back to business as usual year after year. So it's just a really intriguing dynamic where storytelling is so rampant. The mock drafts, all this anticipation. It's the emotional connections around these stories that seems to really come through. And whether I still don't know. I actually asked this question of our people we're going to hear from in a second, and I wasn't really sure. I didn't come up with a defined conclusion on it.
Well, I think one of the interesting bits you talked about there is, one player can change everything in the hope. And I think that's really where the NFL probably is unique to any of the other major leagues is parity. You really don't know who's going to win. The other day was having an argument with someone, so I used my good friend ChatGPT, and I Googled, I chat GPT. I don't know what the verb for that is. We all said Googled. I don't know what the verb is for that. But I said, over the last 10 years, how many times has the preseason favorite gone on to win the Super Bowl over the last 10 years? It's only happened twice, which I thought was a bit surprising. The
Wow.
Chiefs weren't the favorites more often, but it's only happened twice in the last 10 years. I looked it up for the Premier League. Only twice is the preseason favorite, not one, because Man City's just been so heavily favored and things like that.
Sure.
And I think you think about things like Formula One, Lewis Hamilton had such a run with things, and then tennis, Djokovic was on a run. And the NBA technically has a salary cap, but they abuse it with the luxury cap. And baseball, the Dodgers have an incredible salary. Real Madrid, Barcelona, always the top. Like the NFL, like one player can change that. I mean, I'm a Bengals fan. I'm biased. If you can't see the video behind me, Joe Burrow's in a photo behind me. Joe Burrow single-handedly changed the entire face of the franchise. So the way the salary cap works, the way that the best players don't have a say in where they go, like I think the fact the NFL is so unpredictable, that is what makes the draft so big, is like there's just so much hope behind it. People are like, please let this be the person that's going to change everything. And I think that really matters with the NFL, that other sports, like I think that's really difficult to replicate with the way other sports leagues are structured.
100%. And I think that the tricky thing I tried to come to grips with is there is only 17 games in the season, right? And there's a cliched line, but any given Sunday, anything can really happen. And I do think that the best outside, there's normally a couple of teams that sort of sit at the top echelon, that sit in that top window, but you can see them countless times where those teams will lose despite all expectations, despite being record points favorites, and lose to what the teams that everyone is writing off completely. They think no chance of this team will even possibly be able to fight with them. But any given Sunday, one of those teams can step up, find a way, make a big play, and those things can happen. And I think what really adds to that is because of the playoffs. And the playoffs, the fact that there's no best of sevens, best of fours, whatever it is. It's any one match you can get through to the next tier, and it doesn't take many to get to the Super Bowl, right? So anyone can get there just with a few good results. Whereas in the NBA, as an example, with best of seven playoffs, it should be almost always the best team gets through. In theory, there's always a couple of exceptions, but generally after 7 games, you'd be pretty comfortable that the team that's got through because they are the best team. But in the NFL, it doesn't. It's not about that. There's that whole layer of jeopardy and hope that exists that makes it such a unique property. And I can't think of many sports that operate with that level of jeopardy in the world. And it keeps them uniquely placed. And I just hope they don't continue to add more and more games, because it will start to thin out that impact. But for now, they're riding high and higher than most.
Now, in terms of the NFL, I think one of the things sometimes at our events, just my own personal take, speaking to people, they can sometimes be dismissed a little bit because the idea is they have so much resource, they're going to solve whatever problem they have. Like they're almost too big to fail, and there's not a ton to be gained. And I can understand for some organizations, you look at the NFL and the financial resources or the personnel resources they have, that it doesn't feel relatable. But that I don't think means that, everyone should ignore them or there aren't things to learn from them. And, I think maybe perhaps, tier ones in other domestic markets like the Premier League in the UK, like the IPL in India, what can those organizations learn from someone like an NFL? And I appreciate it's not as simple as we've discussed on numerous occasions why you can't just duplicate what the NFL does because of the way the advertising structure works in the NFL. Like the Premier League can't all of a sudden just start pumping in a bunch of ads. They can't monetize the same way the NFL does. But I don't think that's to say that there aren't things the NFL does in terms of how it builds these special packages for Netflix, what it does with the offseason content we just referred to. For those that are the tier ones in their domestic markets, what should they be learning or paying attention to what the NFL does?
Well, you're going to hear a bit about it actually in the second half of this podcast. But when I spoke to Tim Ellis, the CMO, which is the person you're going to be hearing from later, one of the things he talked about, things like messaging rather than moment. So they were really focused on brand perception of the NFL. So, and one of the stats that he shares, and I think it's up on some of our social channels as well, is they were seen as the most negatively perceived, basically, league brand in sports in the US. Now they're number one. And they focused on that over almost anything else. They were of the opinion that, look, if we do anything with the NFL, we'll get big audiences. We don't have to think about that. We want to think about the message and the story we want to tell and the brand that we want to have, and focus more on that more than anything. So the campaigns they would do, the initiatives they would do around the edges were focused on enhancing their brand first and foremost. And I just don't think I've seen anything that's obvious from the Premier League and from other major leagues outside of the US that think like that, that think like almost like an agency, to think about the deeper positive PR impact that it can have by doing the right sort of campaigns in market. Like I know that the Premier League has done stuff, but they don't seem to own or have a lot of, what would you call it? Yeah, there's a lot of outward facing stuff. I think there's this huge issue. There's a huge tension between football fans and leagues and teams for obvious reasons, particularly around the finances. And I think most of them just gone into hiding a little bit, probably because of that. And I can understand why, but they have to find a way to overcome it. I think they've got to find a way to really become more front and center and be a leading voice in communities and fandom again, and not trying to be hiding away because they're too afraid of the repercussions, which is an easy thing for me to sit and say in my little corner over here. But I think that's the only way you're going to get a different style of relationship with fans that they have today.
With the Premier League, we've talked about the recent upcoming conclusion of their partnership with IMG. Do you think that potentially signals some moves, not necessarily from what you talked about from a marketing perspective, but from a content perspective? Because the NFL does have the NFL Network, which we've talked about. They've looked at kind of moving off from, but they do have this whole in-house media that is always constantly pushing out content. Do you think the Premier League potentially do something along those lines? It's not that Sky doesn't have Sky Premier League channels where it's getting coverage, but the NFL does seem to have a bit more ownership over the content it produces. I don't feel like I see as much content directly produced by the Premier League I necessarily see from the NFL.
Well, I think the Premier League's historically been mainly focused on servicing its rights partners, so the broadcasters that it works with through its Premier League Productions relationship with IMG, and not so focused on marketing campaigns, storytelling campaigns, PR, brand, community, etc., to anywhere near the level of the NFL. It might be one of the reasons why, one of the reasons that the NFL can do that well is because they have such experience in creating content. They're constantly doing it, constantly learning more than pretty much anyone else has been because of the NFL Network and their media machine they have in-house. And the Premier League is gearing up to make a move into that direction. So maybe that will give them the impetus and give them the platform and the experience to be able to make that happen, become basically control more of the narrative, control more of the messaging, and rather than leaving it up to third-party voices and media platforms and clubs and stuff to do that for them. It's a really tricky balance, but I think they have to take more control of the narrative, create more content that helps them tell the stories they want to tell, and taking more control of their media production will be a huge step in the right direction for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, now that you kind of talking through that, Nick, I was thinking about like when I watch Sky Sports and when I watch the NFL, I don't know how much you watch Sky Sports coverage, but it does feel really negative about the Premier League. It's always about so-and-so players underwhelming, so-and-so players upset with the manager. Whereas I think about the NFL, it's a bit of a different vibe to even you get things like Pat McAfee and some of the coverage they do. I hadn't thought of it, but now that I do think about it, I feel like most of the time I watch Sky Sports, they're usually being negative about somebody as opposed to being positive about somebody.
That's something going to more of a root cause and problem of society as a whole and social media and alike, where if you're sensationalist or you're negative, you're probably more likely to get headlines and eyeballs and so forth. But I do think there's something in that if you can get the right approach and lean more positive and just create a better aura around the league and the players, it will serve you a lot better. But tricky in the UK, tricky in this sort of tabloid world, the tabloid country where it's been built on sensationalism, built on gossips, rumors, stories for far too long. So it's a culture thing you've got to address, which I am not an expert on how to navigate that, that's for sure.
And then the last sort of question we'll talk about before we hand things over to your interview with Tim Ellis is NFL, big, massive, giant, but still to this day, as far as I'm aware, last time I checked, 99% of their broadcast revenue is domestic. Now, we just mentioned the Premier League. They're rare. They're the only league that I'm aware of that makes more money internationally than it does domestically. So it's not as if there's a large precedent for people to be making lots of money internationally, but less than 1% is a pretty significant disparity between the two. What can the NFL perhaps learn from other organizations that are not tier ones as they go to spread internationally? And, we've seen some of the things they've done, but I'm sure if they could, they'd like to make that number, greater than 1%.
It's so tricky because of the live. There's still the value and the perceived value of live sports rights, right? And the time zone issues. Like they sit in a pretty unique window of time where the only countries that are on the same time zones are South American and Central American countries. Otherwise, for us in Europe and the UK, and I know from time in Australia, you have to really want to be a fan. You have to really watch it. You can't stumble across it. And that's always going to be the tricky part. I've had a bit of thought about this before. I wonder whether they need to go bolder in trying to strike more live NFL broadcast deals with free-to-air and linear broadcasters and own those late-night graveyard rating slots. I wonder if that would be something that could open up a door to a new set of audiences of fans, because at the moment, in markets like the UK, for example, it's mainly on Sky, I think, is the bulk of it. I think there might be some stuff going on linear. But anyway, the model of taking a more complete approach of making sure that games are available, or a game is available on linear channels, live, wherever it is, just trying to attract those audiences, even if they're really minor because it's midnight or 1 a.m. in those markets, just get more and more visibility alongside what they've been doing for some time now, and is adding more and more games. That's something we talk about in this upcoming discussion, is the fact that the NFL is really rolling out this international series of games right across the world, from Australia, Brazil, UK, Germany, France, I think, as well.
It's going to Madrid this year, which the Bengals are rumored to be headed to, yeah.
So, and they're taking this approach because they believe that can really, again, fuel the fandom, create real excitement. And they're not just focus on the people going to the game. It's the excitement, the storytelling, again, like we talked about at the start, all around that experience and moment in the country, in the city itself, that comes with that. Because obviously the time zones is still an issue for them when they do those events. I wonder whether at some stage they will create a truly international round, which is just a wholly and solely round that exists to serve those markets, and time zones they have to find that sweet spot, because obviously all the money's still coming out of the US. They can't give up on where the money's coming from, if it's 99% or whatever the number is. But try to find a way to just inch some more of those games at an earlier window that live fans can really watch and consume. But that's a tricky game to play. I like, though, that I think, in short, that they are playing in the slow game, the long game here. They tried to move faster. They tried to do what the NBA's trying to do now and launched an NFL Europe, and they thought it would be magic and kick off, and it did not plan out. And I need to ask that when I'm interviewing the MD of NBA Europe next week at Sports Pro Live about that. But actually, by the time this is coming out, this will literally be when I'm speaking to him. But anyway, I don't know how they overcome that. I think things they can overcome is they can focus on the non-live side to bring that to life. And who knows, maybe own the graveyard slot. I think that's something intriguing. I think would be open to be a lot of broadcasters that would be up for that sort of opportunity as well.
Absolutely. So, Nick, we are going to hand things over to your interview with Tim Ellis, who is the CMO at the NFL. Is there anything you want to give people a heads up on? I mean, other than the fact he's a CMO of arguably the most powerful, biggest sports league in the world? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, look, I spoke to Tim Ellis, and I also spoke to his senior vice president, Marissa Solis, who's the SVP of Global Brand and Consumer Marketing. She's super impressive, ex-Pepsi, and he's got a strong agency background. Funnily enough, Tim actually lived right around the corner from where I used to live in Sweden, which was quite random. So we had a bit of an interesting chat about that. So a very small world. But he comes from a strong agency background, and you can really hear in how they talk. It's just so much more in depth and detail about how they're looking at what they do with the NFL brand and looking through an agency brand lens, and it really transfers into how successful they have been. So there's a lot of great insight in how they approach the marketplace, how they make these tempo moments work for them, how they're focused on. They just look at sports marketing a little bit differently to everyone else. And we also talk a bit about their international strategy, how they're working with clubs and allowing clubs the rights to market themselves more actively in a variety of different markets. And that's been a huge success for them to try and build more fandom. So there's a lot of good stuff in this. I think I actually end up swearing at the end because I want to keep talking to them a bit longer. And I'm talking about the fact that it's the end of the event. We recorded this interview at the time, but no, really interesting conversation. They're two really impressive people, and I think it's definitely worth a listen if you're interested in anything to do with marketing and sports.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, joining in. Please stick around to hear Nick's interview with Tim Ellis, the CMO at the NFL, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, everyone. This is going to be a fun one, I think. I'm not putting expectations too high here, but we've got a lot of good stuff to dig into for the final session of the event. So looking forward to getting into it. But here to talk a lot about the marketing side of the NFL. Often we talk about the media side of the business, particularly from media rights side, is often a big topic in the sports industry. But we don't always talk enough, I think, about marketing strategies that underpin the industry. And particularly NFL has really, I think, led the way, and we're going to prove that out in this conversation in the next 30 minutes, being really innovative in how they approach it. So, Tim, if we start with you on that, I'd like you just to set the scene. What is the macro view on the marketing strategy before we go a little bit deeper and talk about the brand side specifically? So what's the macro strategy from on the marketing side for the NFL?
Yeah, well, thanks, Nick. And how you doing, everybody? Thank you for sticking around. Appreciate it. I know we're the last thing between you and your afternoon cocktail on Friday, so we appreciate that. So at the NFL, well, first of all, a lot of people will ask me, why does the NFL need marketing? You know, they've got a great league, great games. People are going to show up and watch the game. Why do we really need marketing? Obviously, we have to continue to grow our audience and get more people, right, to watch the games and engage with our content. But there's also a lot of work that we do around the image perception of the NFL as well, because that really helps us, create more brand ambassadors, get more people who want to be a part of our program and who will really kind of speak on our behalf to all of our fans and would-be fans. So, we do a fair amount of work in the marketing area to drive people to either watch, when the games are on, right? Or to go into our YouTube channels and all of our social channels to engage with our content. But then we work very hard to really put forth the things that we know drive affinity to the NFL and get people to actually open up their minds and think differently about the NFL. We sort of have a two-pronged strategy. One is around, the joy of the game, and the second is around transcending the game. And that a lot of that work is all the cause work we do and all the things, the type of work that is with our players and then the community, right? All of our communities around the country.
And please jump and take it a step further.
Yeah, no, and just to take it a step further, I mean, as Tim said, our only currency at the league, as with any other sport, is relevance, right? So we have to stay relevant to the growing fan base and the future generations. And as Tim said, we have a two-pronged messaging approach, but it really is under this helmets off umbrella. And Tim, brilliantly thought of this strategy to essentially take the helmets off our players and make the league a lot more human, approachable, inclusive, because at the end of the day, it's that human-centric storytelling that really drives the fan base. And so everything that we do, whether it's, big TV advertising all the way to a social media post or what we do with our big media broadcast partners, it is all about that human-centric storytelling and bringing that to life.
So Marissa, to go a bit further again on that, on the brand side, how important is it to get, how hard is it to get the brand position right? So when fans are engaging with content, engaging with your channels, that, what's the right word? That they drink the Kool-Aid, they buy into it from like the get-go. You don't have to work too hard to get them to understand what you're trying to do. Does that make sense? So basically, how do you make sure that you can build that connection? So if you post something, if you create content, if you create a new initiative or a campaign, people instantly, it resonates with them from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, I think you narrow it down to two very important things: the timelessness of our brand, and there are certain characteristics about the NFL that are timeless. I mean, we are an exciting game. We are a game of possibilities. We uplift. It is a unifying game that people love to see, and those are timeless things. The timely is where, things get really interesting, because you have to show up in a way that your fan base will engage. And so, 10 years ago, we showed up in a very different way. Today, you have to be where your audience is. I mean, we can't expect them to come and just watch our 4-hour games. They do. They do. We have a big viewership, but we have to go out and be where they are. And whether that's platforms like TikTok, who I believe you just heard from, or YouTube, or, any of your social digital platforms, we have to be there.
I would say this, listen, I think everybody in here knows this is a sports conference here, right? So fans out there, they don't really care that much about a league, right? They care about the players, they care about their clubs. And then in a distant third, it's the league. So even though we, our brand, if you will, is the NFL, we're ambassadors of football. Right. And we do everything in our power to have that emotional connection, get behind the spirit of the athlete, and have that human emotional connection with our fans, and then just find ways, depending on what the fans are interested in, to feed them that type of content. And I think we've been pretty good at working well with our players and getting behind the things that they care about, right? And that could be music or fashion or gaming, or it could be a cause that they really burn for, and that from their foundation that they want to share that with the rest of the world. And so we do our best to understand them, have a true partnership, so it's not transactional. And ultimately, I think fans feel that. Right? They know that we're together and that we are an entity unto ourselves, right? Both the clubs, the league, and the players.
So there's a lot of different ways to measure growth, to measure success, to measure the scale of the league and its performance. And there's different measures. The content consumption, ratings can be one of those. What metrics can you share with us that sort of quantify where the NFL is today in terms of scale, reach, audience? What are ones that you sort of lean to point towards? Maybe, Tim, if I can start with you there.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing, of course, there's no doubt, is tune in, right? Like we make our money, just like everybody in the leagues in here. We make our money through people watching and engaging with our content, right? So when we average about 20 million people will tune in for any given game. And then as you get into the playoffs and ultimately the Super Bowl, it'll get into 50 to 200 million people will tune in. So that's obviously we're always pushing toward that. But in marketing, we're really looking at our fan base. So we want to know not just how many fans out there, but in order to stay relevant, as Marissa rightly pointed out, and to really future-proof the league, we're always looking at our younger audiences, right? And we look at that youth segment from 5 to 12 and then 12 to 24. We have obviously very different programs for each of those segments, but we're constantly looking at those key demographics. I mean, Marissa is in charge of all the acquisitions that build the NFL today and tomorrow. So she's brilliant in the way that she brings in these youth segments, the Hispanic, the Latino segment, which is critical for our health today and tomorrow. And then also, of course, girls and women. And things like, for example, you've seen a lot of work we've done recently in flag football for girls and women, right? That's by no accident. That's a critical marketing strategy. It's participation, but it's a marketing strategy, because we know that if you play the game, you're 4 times as likely to become a fan. And if you don't get them by the time that they're 18 years old, you're probably never going to get them. So it's critical for us to sort of employ these things. So, fandom, tune in, and then of course there's a whole load of other metrics that I won't bore this audience with.
We all love a good metric or two, that's for sure. Marissa, to go take that just a little bit further from what Tim's talked about. He mentioned that you've been leading on some of those initiatives to drive engagement with new fan groups. What are some things you look towards to really quantify the success of those initiatives that Tim outlined?
Yeah, I mean, obviously our growth audiences are massive for continuing to grow the fan base now and in the future. Couple of metrics Tim did mention, perception, obviously huge, and especially with these growth audiences, and then consumption beyond viewership of the game, but consumption on digital, consumption, across a variety of channels. And so as we look to, these new audiences, they aren't consuming the games in the way our core audiences do, right? Like they have very short attention spans, as you all know. So we have to create really unique, snackable content for them, but that still drives to the game, that still is engaging. So I think you've seen a lot of our alternative casts that really bring audiences from, our young audiences through Nickelodeon when we do our Nick Christmas games, partnerships with Disney when we did Toy Story. We just did Simpsons this year and brought in just an incredibly amount of audiences in that way. We have an incredible member of our team, Ian Trombetta, who leads our social and influencer and creator strategy, and the things that his team has been able to do, not just on platforms like YouTube, but live as we create, celebrity football games, flag football games, and experiential things like, we were just with Joe Burrow in Paris Fashion Week. So things like that, to really bring the audience in the surround sound of football and the sport, really work to grow the audience.
I mean, I think the title of this thing was like the NFL marketing machine, which I like that.
You can use.
And I mean, really, I think that's what it is. Like we have created together. I think if there's anything I'm good at is putting good teams together. Okay. I like to think I have good judgment and I have good gut instincts, but I think I'm very good at putting teams together and then letting them do their thing. Kind of unleashing them, pointing the direction, and then getting behind what they do. And I think this machine, if you will, is incredibly well balanced. I think maybe most people know about the brand work that we do because obviously with the Super Bowl and some of the games we play, we get a really big platform. But the work that we do in the social and the creator space, the incredible work we're doing on the data-driven one-to-one programs really that's the reason we are where we are. I mean, Marissa mentioned impressions, the impression of the NFL, right? Perceptions. We've now grown 6 years in a row, and it's the highest perception in the history of the NFL. When I joined the NFL almost 7 years ago, we were literally dead last amongst all the leagues in image perception, and now we're number one. And I take a lot of pride in that because I think that we've been consistent and we've been working as a true team. And I think that ultimately has just helped us get stronger and stronger.
It's an interesting stat to focus on and to look to, because one of the challenges you have when you're focusing on growing new audiences is how you make sure you don't alienate your core fan base, and that's the NFL is such a strong core. Tim, how have you found that balancing act? Has it been difficult to make sure that's right, or it seems that clearly hasn't been too difficult?
Well, I mean, I talked about that two-pronged strategy, right? Like the joy of the game obviously is your core audiences. And we really feed them with incredible, high-octane, exciting content, right? Like this game is incredibly athletic and exciting. I mean, the league, and we should talk about that. It makes our job so much easier because the way the league has been developing, the way that the teams can, retain players and get new players and so forth. You can be dead last 1 year, and then the next year you're number one going to the Super Bowl. And that makes it exciting for all of our fans. And like the games have never been closer. The offenses have never been stronger. So we're just seeing a great product, right? And that obviously helps a lot. And we're very good about feeding that content to our base, and which is, let's face it, it's primarily guys like me, right? But we do a tremendous amount of work to bring in these other audiences. I think the best strategy we have had is just basically football is for everyone. I think we're very at times provocative and brave in the way that we do that. We do communication that I know a lot of our fan base doesn't like, but it's okay to make some people uncomfortable as long as you're growing your fan base and as long as you're doing the things to retain that core audience, which we are. And so, yeah, I hear a lot at times like, oh, you know, why do you do that stuff? Just stick to football. You know, why are you doing these things that feel to us like politics? Well, for us, it's not politics. It's just being a good human. It's according to our values. So it's the humanitarian side of what we do. And if it makes some of our audience uncomfortable, that's okay. And I think that's helped us get to where we are and ultimately retain that base and bring in a whole new audience.
So one of the biggest stats talked about in the industry is, we talk about consumption, is the Super Bowl. And the ratings they cover get huge amount of coverage year on year, and what they're going to be, and then all the talk around them. And now you have this extra layer of streaming on top, which is giving a whole new lease or opportunity or where that's going to take the audiences and the reach that you have available to you. Just how, as the NFL, when you focus on building out campaigns and strategy through your season, what role exactly does the Super Bowl play in that? It feels like for me, it's kind of its own machine, its own beast. It's got a lot going on. You have the organizers themselves on the ground who have their own approaches, brands, teams, etc., all doing their thing. What role does it play in terms of your specific campaigns and approach that you're operating? Marissa, maybe starting with you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Super Bowl is the epitome of culture and audience. I mean, 200 million viewers. I don't think anything else can command that. But it's a very interesting from a strategic point of view for us, because when you think about who actually views the Super Bowl, is a very, very casual audience. I mean, there's a vast amount of viewers of the Super Bowl who haven't watched a single game in the entire season, and some who've never tuned into the NFL. So huge opportunity for us as the league to really bring them in, not just through the event itself and the culture and, you know, the halftime show and all of those things, but in our advertising itself, right? So we pick the most strategic things to talk about, and that is the focus of our advertising. So if you look at this year, to Tim's point, the joy of the game, we talked all about the power of flag football. And there was a very clear message about flag football sanctioning in high schools, because it's such a big deal, in the sport. If it becomes an official high school sport, then you've got a pipeline to the NCAA and so on and so forth. So very important message for us that we conveyed in I think a very fun and entertaining way. On the other hand, in terms of transcending the game, we had a very powerful message around mentoring and mentoring to kids, which is what we do best in terms of the partnerships that we have in the community. We had Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Special Olympics, and we did a message about, feeling somebody, like kids, really reciting these powerful words with players that I think really resonated. And so, yes, there's the halftime show and there's all of these incredible things about the game and the event and the whole week of Super Bowl if you've been there. But the advertising piece is very key for us to say the most important messages to an audience that we otherwise wouldn't get throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I think most marketers, the smart ones, know that the things that you put forth in the Super Bowl are the things which are your most important strategic initiatives or your focus areas. Too much of the time, I think brands get out there and they get so freaked out by how the ads are graded and the ad meter and all that, and they stretch things in a direction to where it's not true to who they are, or it's not really about things that will drive their business forward. Everything we do in the Super Bowl is something which is a part of our overall programs. It's our highest strategic initiatives. And don't get me wrong, we want to win the ad war. Like, we want to be in the top. I mean, I'm very proud of this. We're the only brand that's had 3 years in a row to be in the top 5 of all the roundups of the creative. So it's not like we don't care about the creative. We definitely care about the creative, but it's always focused on things that we know will drive the growth of our business. It's no accident, but the last 2 out of 3 years, that flag football was at the focus, because we know that's one of the most important things that will grow our game and that will ultimately make us successful down the road. And then we had an ad last year, which was very powerful, that was about our International Pathway Program, which is essentially, how does the NFL become more global? Because let's face it, we are not right now global. We play in global games, but we have a long way to go before we're in the top 3 sports in our key markets around the world. And we're very aware of that, self-aware, and we have to make major strides in order to be successful. So the ad that we focused on was all about the things that we were doing in order to be successful around the world. And I think ultimately it just rallies people, right? It gets them excited, makes them more interested, and it's not only to our fans, but it's also to our internal audiences as well.
So I'm going to move on to the international side. That's a beautiful segue, Tim. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
But one thing, just before I do jump into that, it's what strikes me is both of you talking about how you're approaching your marketing strategy. Is you're talking much more about the campaign, the story, versus how many pieces of content, how many million eyeballs we got on anything. I don't know if that's how you look at things. It's more about what stories you can tell that align with the message, or is that just the method to get to hit those numbers, hit those eyeballs, hit that reach? How do you think it's so important that when you're building a marketing strategy, you have to focus on the story first, the message first, versus what I think sometimes we get so caught up in just numbers, getting more eyeballs on the platform?
Well, the story is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
I mean, helmets off is the strategy. We're taking the helmets off the players. You cannot see the human-centric storytelling without the story is at the core of the messaging. We know, 200 million views, we know we're going to get the eyeballs. So that's not the concern. Is we better have the most strategic, the most powerful messages to capture that audience, because you don't get a second chance to capture 200 million people. And when you speak about global, as we get into global, the Super Bowl is kind of, in essence, the beginning for a global audience as opposed to the end. It's the culmination of the season for us. For someone in Europe, as an example, that's when they first tune in. So we got to capture them and bring them in and start to engage them throughout the season, which people think it's the off season, but no, we've got work to do to make sure those audiences are engaged year-round.
The only other thing I would say is, of course, we care about how many people we're going to reach, right? Like every time I look at something, it might be a great idea. It might be an incredibly creative and interesting idea, but if ultimately only like 22 people are going to see it, then I'm not going to greenlight it, right? Like I'm going to go on the award shows here, but like there's a lot of these award shows where people do ads because they know they'll win an award, and that's fine if they want to do that, but ultimately we're trying to drive our business. And so if you can't get any scale, if you can't get a large audience who will actually make a difference at the end of the day, then you should refocus. So no, we don't focus on the numbers. Obviously, we look to make sure that things are working. We review, we don't do pre-testing, but we test everything that we do after we do it, right? So we want real world reaction to our work, and we learn from that, and then we bring that in and optimize as we move forward. But we're very careful on getting scale on everything that we do.
So let's go international. It's been a big focus, I want to say, on and off over the last couple of decades. I think for the NFL, there's been different initiatives. There seems to be great momentum at the moment from what I'm seeing, not just by the fact that you're bringing more games out there, but there seems to be, when I travel a lot across Europe and the UK and in Australia, where I spend a lot of time in all those different places, there's real interest there, more than I've seen. So what is the strategy? What is the approach there to keep bringing that to life? Is it a very localized approach? Tim, maybe if you want to start with you, how are you bringing that to life? Or is it just all about those live events, which you're now expanding into new markets?
Well, the live events are really important to sort of get it as a spark, right? To start things, but they're not the end sort of part of the strategy. They're just to get people interested, get them going. And we don't go to international markets for games that are preseason or they don't count. All of the games that we play internationally all count. They're part of the regular season. And our league, in our league, we don't have that many games. So literally every single game counts. You can't afford to not think about a game. So we're very serious in the way that we go out there. We're right now, what is it, 7 games or 6 games internationally, but we're going to be doing around 16. That's kind of like where we see, at least in the near future. And we started in sort of Mexico and Europe, and now we just had a game in Brazil, and we're going to have another one in Spain, and we'll be announcing later other games that we're going to be having in other parts of the world. So we are very aggressively approaching that. But we're really thinking hard about how do you create excitement and fandom and relevance in these markets, not just put on a game. It's not hard for us to sell tickets to an NFL game. Literally in Germany, the first time we went there, I think it was like 65,000 seats in that stadium, and there were 4 million requests. So it's not like we have a hard time filling the stadium, but we want those 4, 5, 10 million to be fans, right? To really be true long-term fans. So there's a lot of things that we're doing inside the building to really figure out, together with our partners internationally, to figure out what is the key, because our real goal is to be a top 3 sport in every market where we operate, which is probably going to be anywhere from 14 to 18 markets around the world.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add, I think the challenge for us as marketers is, as we try to build a global fan base, in America, we're coming from a position of leadership. We are the market leader. When we go to any country in the world, we're a challenger brand. And so it's a very, very different approach in terms of how do you spark the interest, right, in the fan base? A big game will do that, but there's other ways. How do you then engage them and then keep them throughout the year when, there may be one live game and then the Super Bowl, right? We've got to create more local events, but also global events to make sure that they tune in and are excited.
But a few key tenets, like I talked about the International Pathway Program. So actually, we have development centers around the world. So in Africa and Australia and various, Europe and South America, we have where we're developing players. And we're seeing like one of our players through there just literally won a Super Bowl as an offensive lineman from Australia, which is pretty freaking cool. And then we have academies around the world. So again, we're sort of at a youth level. We're growing the sport through the players. And then, listen, ultimately flag football is going to be the Olympics, the LA 28 Olympics. Our goal is to also be in the Brisbane Olympics, in Australia, in 32. So that's another way that we're growing the sport through that. So by a combination of culture, right? Like really using what's great about America culturally to connect with fans around the world, and growing the players and then being there and playing the game. Those are all the ways in which we're growing this sport.
I think it might be sometimes lost on some Americans to understand the scale of when those moments do happen. Being Australian, one of the experiences I had was a bunch of players over the years have popped up all of a sudden trying to get in, or have made just a practice squad, and that makes national media coverage, and not just for a moment, gets consistent coverage on their journey on the road to potentially making the team or not. So those individual stories seem to be absolutely what's driving fandom in those markets, and we see that across all other sports. So let's go a bit more on the international side. One of the big challenges in international is a pretty obvious one, particularly with your business model and just the way that the league operates, is driven from media rights revenue of the live match. Time zone wise is not particularly supported in Europe, where obviously the Super Bowl, for example, starts I think like at 12 o'clock at night. And I've tried a few times. I've tried a few times to watch all the way through, and I make it sometimes. The one time I didn't, I left after the third quarter. And that was when Tom Brady came out with the record comeback against the Falcons. And from there on, I've been damaged.
You should have stayed up.
Yeah, I've been really damaged by that ever since. But just talk me through, because of that issue, because of the fact that the casual fans are going to be so much harder to bring into the sport because of that issue. Are you measuring in a similar way still? Is it still about ultimately driving audiences to the live game, or is it about all the other ways that people can engage with the NFL content around the live match day?
It's both. I mean, I know what you're saying. So Nick lives in Sweden. I used to live in Sweden for many years. And I can remember that you talk about Tom Brady. So his first, believe it or not, his first win against the Rams in that Super Bowl, I was up at 5 a.m. in some little bar in Sweden watching that damn thing, and I definitely did not go to bed. And it was one of the most exciting games I think I ever saw. So there, but it's hard to get people to stay up that late. But listen, we do a lot of things, particularly the earlier games on Sunday, to ensure it's in a prime window when at least Europeans can see the game. And obviously in Central South America, they can as well. But it is both. Like obviously Monday nights and things like that, or a Super Bowl, most fans are not going to stay up all night to watch that. We understand that. So we have a lot of ways in which we deliver that content. They can rewatch the content, or they can obviously see it on YouTube or whatever. But our programs around social, and increasingly so creators and influencers, is really a really good way to get people interested in the game. The other thing we haven't mentioned here is to, educate around the game. I mean, it's one thing to throw a basket through a hoop, or to hit a ball into a hole, right? People don't understand American football around the world. It looks like freaking chaos. Like it stops, it starts, like they go together, they get out, like what the fuck is going on? No one understands what's going on. So, to educate people on the game is really important, and we're increasingly getting better at doing that in a very entertaining way, to sort of like get ambassadors of the game and local influencers to sort of watch the game with the fans, and then to teach them what's going on so they can actually appreciate it. It's a great game, but it's not a great game if you don't understand what's going on.
And Marissa, just on the flag football concept, that seems like a great gateway in for a lot of people who don't necessarily, they watch maybe the NFL for the first time and go, what's going on, to, okay, well, this is a little bit more simplified. Helmets are off. It's a little bit easier to connect with all of that. Do you find that is as linear as you would want it to be? Where, like, if you can get someone being a flag football participant or a viewing, perhaps that on the grassroots level, that can drive audiences to the live game?
Participation is key, and I think flag is one of those things where anyone can play. It's a very inclusive sport, and it is a bit of a gateway in, right, to then open the world of American football. It's so powerful internationally because there is a very powerful international contingency of flag players. The International Federation of American Football, which IFF, great partners. They really are trying through flag football to educate around the game of American football. And I think when you see it in the Olympics and subsequent Olympics, it'll link back to then, tackle football and the whole world of the sport.
Well, it's an interesting predicament because actually one of my co-hosts on the StreamTime Sports podcast, Chris Stone, is also the women's British NFL coach for the national team, and he's now wondering if he's going to make a move the other way into flag football to see if to also make a run for the Olympics. So we'll see how that plays out. But I'm curious, one thing on the international side we've not covered, and I think gets a lot of praise, is the teams-related approach that you've taken. Super innovative. Tim, could you just talk a bit about how that came about, where you basically gave the marketing rights, or they could bid for the marketing rights effectively for teams to own and take adopt a market, so to speak?
Yeah, and in fact, let me step back a moment and just talk about the role of the teams, because there's obviously a lot we can do at the league, and we have a big responsibility to create a halo for all of the teams. But I think what Marissa and I and her colleague Ian have done very well is working with the executives in all 32 teams to help them build up their own marketing groups. Right? When I first came to the NFL, it was not a great. I think yesterday you saw two of the best, and they have come since I came, because I essentially got around all the presidents and said, listen, I've taken a really close look at your marketing groups, and it's not a pretty picture. Right. And I laid out a blueprint for them. Like, this is what your marketing organization can and should look like. This is about how many people you need in these disciplines. And this is the competency that you need in these areas in order to be successful, not just to sell tickets, but to actually build your own brands of your own teams and be successful. And I think you saw Jen and Kat, who are here from the Rams and the Eagles, and they're two great examples. And there are plenty, by the way, now have really strong marketing teams. So there's that, right? And that helps us overall in the US and abroad. When we work internationally, the way we work now is that we give team rights to go into a market. And it's not just one team, one country. It's like often several teams in a given market, but they have to prove to us that they're actually going to invest and they're actually going to do the things that need to be done in order to be successful there. So you'll have a handful of teams that will go into Australia or Germany or where have you, and they then work with us to sort of like create a level of interest and fandom for their team. And what we found is over time, it's actually working. Like if you go now into the UK, you'll see that there are certain teams like the Vikings who've been there quite a bit. Like people know their brand. They know the culture around their brand. They understand who they are as a team, their values, and the things that are important to them as a sports group. So we're seeing that we're building that level of affinity. So if the NFL can go in there and do all the things that we're doing, and then have the teams go into these individual target countries and create fandom for their groups, then it's really a way for us to be much bigger and stronger.
And one of the highest indicators of fandom growth is favorite team, favorite player. So we as the league can do everything in our power to market the league, but you've got to have the connection to a team, a player in that market to really build the fan base.
And Tim made that point at the beginning, right, about the importance of not trying to just market the league as a whole. No, we are basically out of time, but because it's the end of the event and it's my event, I can do what I like. And I want to run for a couple more questions first before we wrap things up. So apologies, but hold on, it's worth it. Trust me. One of the big things that was something that was achieved through the NFL and was the Sunday ticket deal with YouTube. And what was an interesting thing from my perspective is not only that YouTube came to the table, became a major partner, was at least what it looked like from outside in and from the other side of the world, was that the NFL used to be so tight on its image rights, right? So copyright rights on the live game, highlights, etc. And what you actually did with that deal is there was the relaxation of those rights, and there was the giving of some rights to creators to create content through their YouTube channels. Just how did you get to that decision to make that call to really open up the playbook, I suppose, to bring that to life? And has it paid off as well as you would hope? You're probably going to say yes.
I mean, let's face it, like the NFL was tight on a lot of things, okay? Traditionally, we've been a very conservative organization. I mean, if you think about the shield, right, which is our logo, the shield is like, it looks like the police shield. Like we're the police. The NFL is the police. And that's not what we are. That's not what we want to be. That's not who we are, really. And so I think we have done a lot of work to sort of, as you say, open up the game, open up the rights to these things, not be so controlling over, how many things you post per week and things like that. So we've really worked hard to kind of like allow our partners and to allow the clubs and so forth to have much more flexibility in how they operate. And it kind of goes back a little bit to what I was saying earlier about my own team. Like, I can provide direction, I can provide strategy and so forth to where we want to go. But ultimately, I depend on them to do their thing and to like create fandom and create the right images and all those good things. So I think that we've gotten so much better, right, at doing that. The other thing is you mentioned Sunday Ticket. I think one of the boldest moves that we have made over the last several years is how going from linear TV to our streaming partners and to not only be in certain places. And that took some risk, right? And we're getting TV-like audiences on Amazon, on YouTube, on, Netflix. It's amazing what's happening. But I mean, you might forget, sometimes organizations are very conservative because they know there's a lot to lose. And I think that the risk that we took in order to go with these partners, and now we're seeing it was the right move because our average audiences are much younger than they were before. And we haven't gone backwards. In fact, we've only gone forward. So there's lots of things I think that we did which relaxed some of our somewhat conservative principles and rules, as well as taking risks, which really have paid off.
And I'll just add, as a marketer, it's never easy to give creative control to a third party or a creator. But what we found is that value exchange has been so incredible for both. So when you grant access to a Mr. Beast to go behind the scenes at Tampa Bay or come to the Super Bowl, the value we get from Mr. Beast content and his viewers that aren't necessarily NFL viewers is just, it's invaluable. And so as a marketer, yeah, it's hard to give up control, but you just get so much more out of it. And that's how we're growing our younger audience.
That's probably, we talk about the ecosystem. Somebody was up here earlier talking about the importance of the ecosystem. I think at least when I first joined, we were thinking only about our owned and operated, right? Which is pretty big, but that's kind of what we were thinking about. And I said, we have to open our minds on this thing. Our true ecosystem is all the audiences of all of our players, all of our teams, all of our influencers and creators. It's anybody who loves this game who wants to share their passion. That's our ecosystem. And we suddenly went from like 40, 50, 60 million to over 2 billion, right? In terms of our reach. And I think that's ultimately helped us grow our game. The other thing I want to mention here, we haven't said once, which shame on us, we haven't talked about our core partners like 72 and Sunny, our advertising agency. They're family. Like we work with our partners, all of our partners. We work with them as true family. And again, we give them not just respect, but we allow them to do things with our brand and to take risks. And we would not be where we are today without the great work and the loyalty and the passion and the excellence of those partners. So 72 and Sunny, of course, is our advertising agency. But I mean, I don't want to go too far here, but I'm not trying to kiss anybody's ass. But the partners we have, corporate partners we have, I mean, the more that we work with them, the deeper we go, the more we bring them in to understand our brand and to understand their business, the stronger our collective programs are. And ultimately, the Tides and the Nikes and the massive partners that we have are only doing better work, which is helping them and helping us. And I think that's been a key to our success.
And the NFL seems to be leading away in a lot of those different aspects of driving fandom. But look, that is definitely all we've got time for. I'm getting the wind up from the people at the back of the room, so it's definitely time. But thank you very much to Tim and Marissa
Thanks,
for
everybody.
joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you
it for joining us at the event.
Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as Sports Pro Nick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, Streamtimers. Until next time.